I want to thank the work that the staff has put in to get this back to us so quickly and with such detailed steps, next steps and answers to some questions that we have. I do want to mention that I know that there is a cost to this study, but I think it's well worth it. It's a small price to pay for ensuring that our families know, and the rest of the city, families in my district for certain, know exactly what this initiative is all about, and that they're not steamrolled by one developer that will try to reshape our city. I also want to mention that my residents, some of my residents are here, and they're very concerned. I've had countless phone calls and conversations, and I just want to mention to my colleagues that it's not only just my District 8 residents that are concerned, but it's environmentalists, it's seniors who feel that they've been misrepresented, it's veterans. So they want the city to do this hard work and the study to be able to tell them clearly and exactly what effect this will have on their neighborhood. They also want to know what the traffic impacts will be and why Ponderosa won't be paying traffic mitigations. We've just had some repavement of our streets, which I was really happy about, but when we repave streets, there's always some traffic that is caused. And it was such bad traffic. It would take me more than an hour to get here from Evergreen to downtown. And so it was a really harsh reminder for all of us who live in District 8 that there's very few options in terms of these arterial streets, streets that provide us our exit from our communities. And so not having any traffic mitigation for us is really severe and mind-boggling. As well as being exempt from CEQA, so no environmental mitigation. So they want answers to many of these questions on a couple of these issues that are just really dear to their hearts. And we talked, some folks who came in to talk about other. It was another item, but they talked about community benefits, and I was reflecting on the community benefits that were mentioned in this initiative, because as we all know, when there's a development in our respective communities in our districts, there's a mention of community benefits, and there really isn't any in this initiative other than the developer will benefit. And so I would really ask for my colleagues' support in this vote and just moving it forward. Thank you.
Councilmember Rocham.
Thank you, Mayor. And I don't know if Planning Department staff is available, or maybe I should be posing this question to somebody else, but I had submitted a memorandum asking for some, or providing some direction around additional analysis as we go through this process. And this may be premature, but I was curious if staff had any comments or had thought through some of this.
Hi, I'm Kim Wallish, Deputy City Manager. I think our only comment is it's really clear to us that these proponents crafted a ballot initiative where it's not clear what they mean by a key term, and that is underutilized employment lands. They do not define this term. They're the ones who should answer the questions about the meaning of their measure and the language that they use. So at this point, it's hard for us to even address this, engage in this conversation, because it's all about the definition and the interpretation of the implications of underutilized employment land, which is the proponent's term. It's not a city term.
Okay. So if you're suggesting that we don't know what that definition is, I'm sure at some point then our attorney's office would and our staff would try to determine that at some point, not just from now until whenever, just say we don't know what it means.
Well, I mean, again, the 9212 report's designed to focus on what the initiative says and what the initiative's consequences are or impacts are. To the extent you've got what's the term, underutilized employment land, again, it's not defined in the measure. I think it's going to take some time for staff to come back and, essentially give any kind of thought, but it's going to be the council that's going to make the decision as to, I believe, what underutilized employment land is. And I think it's premature at this point to, come back with recommendations and have the council then try to determine it. Let me give you an example. Proposition 13, which has been with us now for probably longer than we'd want, triggers reassessment upon, quote, change in ownership. Change in ownership had to be defined by the legislature after a lot of debate. It includes a lease of 35 years or more. But I'll bet you the Howard Jarvis people never thought a change in ownership was going to be a lease. And so I think this is something that's going to have to be given thought. And I think at this point, given the fact that we're trying to get information out as to what the impact of this ordinance is, or this general plan amendment to this initiative, I think we're just going to try to do the best we can working with some outside consultant to get that information out. I just think it's premature.
Understood. I wasn't suggesting this be part of that. If you read the language, it suggests that staff may wish to consider the following issues as they conduct their analysis. My intention here was more or less for us to look at how these issues play out, and is there any proactive measures we should be taking or considering to protect some of our employment lands or any open space areas that we think might be opportunity sites for use of this particular initiative. So that was the suggestion, to just say, well, we'll deal with that later. I thought that might be something we might want to work on, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Nguyen.
Thank you, Mayor. I really think we all need more information from what we heard from the public and from a little information we have from the city. I thought that we need to find more the facts behind the headline. So I requested, and it was granted, a private meeting with the developer, because I had three simple yet I thought important questions to ask them. One was, what was the story about the 30 years swap of land in exchange from the housing versus the industrial land? Second was the traffic mitigation plan, and third, the affordable housing components. I think staff mentioned, Jack mentioned about the, I was mentioned about the industrial land not being used. I was told that it's been 30 years and that there was no actual concrete viable plan of the industrial development then, and there is nothing in the near future. So even though there was an agreement that there was a swap of land, and this in Barista area, in up north, and this parcel of land was designated as industrial. That was number one. Number two, I did raise concern of the traffic impact, and the response either wasn't clear or was none. Just make use of what we have. Only two roads coming in. We said on Quimby and Yuba Buena up, and there's no other way out. And third, I was interesting to find the people very creative. I must accept that the language was not so clear, but the message was housing for seniors and veterans, right? And the preliminary proposal shown to me was there's a big parcel of land for housing, and there's an outside part of it, outside the gate, is like apartments for rent. The 189 units of apartment for rent. I was a bit surprised, but that was not part of what the message that I got. I thought of all housing being built and being sold, and part of those units will be sold for at affordable price for housing. That's what I thought. But I must admit, technically, they're not wrong, or they correct. So apparently, I really thank you for good effort of city and staff that come back with more information on what it is really behind headlands. So I really appreciate, and I'm looking forward to read your report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Nguyen, for the questions. And I know not all those questions will necessarily be answered within the four corners of the report, because the report just is analyzing the proposal. Let me try to answer the first question you raised, which is an important one. I think the assertion that somehow another industrial development would never go there. On a site just adjacent to that site, we've had, in the last 25 years, Bearing Systems, Bearing Diagnostic, Syntec Labs, Hitachi, for 25 years have been occupying the adjacent site. Those are all research and development office-related uses. And in July of this year, an offer was made to that property owner to purchase that site, the very same site that is the subject of this initiative. And that offer was for $170 million. And the property owner turned down that offer and wanted, I believe, $200 million. And so clearly someone was willing to pay $170 million to build a science park, and perhaps a university. There's other issues discussed, but it's primarily a science park. Whether there's going to be supportive housing or not, that would all be issues that would need to be resolved by the council in a very public process. That suggests to me that certainly the site was at the very least a very viable site for research and development, or is. As well as the fact that, as we've seen, I was called literally 3 months ago, asked by a major investor, do you have any sites that are at least 100 acres? An investor had access to billions of dollars to build out an R&D campus. Similarly, we saw Amazon put out an RFP to cities throughout the country, looking for very large sites. These are sites that are in short supply in a very developed region like ours. And so I guess what I'm saying is that what one person's view of lack of viability may be another person's view as land that we want to bank for the future of the city. If the future of that city means that it's green foothills, that's not a bad thing either. On the other hand, if the future of the city is it's an R&D campus, that's a great opportunity as well. And so I think it's important for us to understand that these are questions that are not answered at a single point in history. They're answered, obviously, as like all cities develop over time. I know we have several members of the community who want to speak, so I'll ask them to come forward now. Steve Bennett, followed by Wesley Lee, followed by Mackenzie Mossing and Burton Smith. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Steve Bennett. I spent the day at the barber shop getting ready for this. I'm a 40-year resident, senior citizen, 10-year veteran. This message is for Mr. Schroeder and Walsh. Are they here? Then I hope they're looking at the internet. We, the citizens, are the ones that built this city, this world-famous valley. We do not like rich people like you coming into town, dictating and threatening our mayor that you can make up your own rules. We're not a bunch of yahoos that are going to roll over and die or play dead. Anyone who submits a 300-page brief for a measure does not have a totally honest message to give. We do not need public funds. We will defeat you at the ballot box, and we'll run you two out on a rail. I'd love to be a fly on the wall in your office when you see the results of the elections. Thank you. One thing on your parking, you got a huge area by the airport that's empty. park cars there, run shuttles. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Mr. Lee?
Hi, my name is Wesley Lee, and I just want to thank you for the opportunity to come here and speak on this topic here. And I've been a resident, in Evergreen for about 20 years, and we in the community are very concerned about this initiative. First, we're very concerned about the advertising that they've been showing out in our community. We get this very nice glossy flyer saying keeping families together and affordable housing for seniors and for veterans. Yet when I look into the overall cost of this and do the math in terms of what the cost per home will be, it very well may be around $1 million. And I don't really consider that to be very affordable. And what else is lurking in this 300-page initiative? I actually did get a chance to go through this. Well, I found this on page 34. This is a statement which is a rewrite of the original Evergreen specific policy, and it states here that the construction of the transportation mitigation improvements will fund it or cause to be funded by using fees collected by the traffic impact fee applied to all new residential, retail, and commercial office development enabled through the EED policy in excess of existing development capacity. And this is where they added in, open parentheses, excluding projects pursuant to the senior housing overlay, which means that they exclude themselves from paying any traffic impact fees. And I don't think this is right. Traffic is a very serious issue in Evergreen. This area is tucked in the corner of the eastern foothills, and its main arterial roads, San Felipe, Yuba Buena, and Aborn, are now operating at near full capacity at peak times. According to some previous environmental studies in the level of service that I've been reading here. And our community will not be idly standing by here. We're going to be organizing to have a petition to oppose this initiative here. We're very, very concerned about this, and as a community, we want to oppose this. I don't think it's the right thing. It's an end run around the city's policies, and there's no community engagement involved in this whole process. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Welcome, Burton. After Burton Smith is Mackenzie Mossing. Go ahead, Mr. Smith. Come on up.
Yeah, Mayor Liccardo, Councilmember Sylvia Arenas, and the City Council. I'm Burton Smith. As President of the Senior Advisory Council at the Evergreen Community Center, I represent a good many seniors in the community. And I'm not aware of anybody I know in that community that could afford one of those high-level, upper-scale houses in the gated community. Also, as a member of the Vietnam Veterans of America, I know a number of veterans in my circle. None of them would ever even consider this. And the major concern that people have, that I know in the senior community, is that it seems to change the whole idea of the infrastructure and the traffic to the point where it seems unreasonable. And a senior just came up to me yesterday, Friday I mean, to say that she wanted to know how, if she could take her name off that petition, because she was convinced by that pushy petition taker to, get her name on the list. And I said, well, there's just no way. And in my own opinion, I'm just deeply disturbed by the apparent waving of the middle finger by the developer to the general plan, the Planning Commission, and the City Council in general. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Mossing.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council members. My name is Mackenzie Mossing. I'm a San Jose resident, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. Our organization is greatly concerned with the Evergreen Senior Homes Initiative and the effect it will have on the environment, land use and planning in San Jose, and the expenses it will impose on San Jose's residents. Now, who has the money to take on such an expensive effort? Billionaire developers, that's who. They will reap the benefits of their development, externalizing the costs onto the environment and onto San Jose's communities. And trusting San Jose residents, hoping to support housing for seniors, residents will pay the price. They will directly and indirectly subsidize this measure while being robbed of employment centers. And the environment. This measure will change zoning and the general plan for the entire city for years to come. Sprawl into Almaden Valley and Coyote Valley and other underutilized lands will follow. The natural world will likely become an incidental victim of this measure. So why are these developers trying to plan by measure? Planning by ballot measure bypasses scrutiny by city staff and elected officials. It circumvents environmental review and normal planning processes that give the public transparency and opportunities to participate. Planning by ballot measure cannot be reversed, and for years to come safeguards the extortion imposed on well-meaning city residents. Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society believes that we desperately needed housing, but we also believe that sidestepping public transparency and environmental regulations is not an appropriate way to address the Bay Area's housing crisis. The Evergreen Senior Housing Measure modifies the entire San Jose general plan for years to come, and the only way to change anything back would be through the prohibitively expensive process of yet another ballot measure at the city's expense. When residents realize they've been duped, it will be too late. So thank you, Councilmember Arenas, for your very well-written editorial that was published today in the Mercury News. We share many of the same concerns, and I urge the rest of you to consider what this initiative means for San Jose's people, land, and wildlife. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, back to the council. Any other questions or comments? All right, let's vote on Councilmember Jimenez's motion. Oh, I forgot to mention, our clerk just mentioned to me that signatories of petitions can withdraw their names. And so there's apparently a process to do so.
Contact the city clerk's office.
Yes, talk to the city clerk's office. Thank you, Tony. All right, that item passes.